Dr. Nisi Thusi, and I would like to welcome Dr. King Costa, who is head of the Global Center for Academic Research in South Africa. He will be the one to introduce Dr. Thusi. Dr. Costa, please.
Thank you, Dr. Reilly. I would like to introduce Dr. Nisi. Dr. Nisi holds a PhD from Lagos University and has just recently acquired a second PhD from South Valley University in Zambia. She is a certified Publons peer reviewer. Publons is part of the Clarivate Analytics company and Web of Science group. She is a management scientist registered with the Southern African Institute of Management Scientists. It is a body of researchers that focus within the management and economic sciences field, and it works with quite a number of universities in South Africa, particularly public universities. And then she is also a member of the Asian Qualitative Research Association, the association that we hold close to our hearts, right? She teaches accounting for non-accounting students at the University of Johannesburg, one of the top universities in the country as well. And she's also an associate professor at the SVU. She just got recently appointed in December, actually, all right? And then she runs Ashes to Beauty, an NPO that empowers young girls and young boys. And you could see the you can see the picture actually on the right there. She is at different schools, particularly in the West Rand, where she actually conducts her research. She's passionate about young kids. She goes to different schools. In August 2020, she did something profound when she coined a project called Women, I think Women in Cloth, and she collected all police women and nurses and those that were, women in uniform, women in uniform, and created a platform for encouraging them due to the work that they were doing as frontliners during COVID-19. Dr. Nisi, over to you.
Yes, Dr. Nisi, welcome to our platform. This is now your time to present. I will stop sharing and kindly share your PowerPoint.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everybody. It is a great honor and a privilege to be part of this community. I will start by saying in this community, the first time I encountered you guys, you were praying and I was like, no ways, this is home, a place that prays together, they learn, they empower each other and they grow together. Hence, I became the member. Let's start now with my topic. The research that I have done is called the lived experiences of educators in relation to the CPTD within the Johannesburg West District High School. Before the democratic in South Africa, educators used to be called teachers. So as old as I am, so I might be swapping from educators to teachers, but they all mean one and the same thing. So you see the picture here. In this picture, the educator is the one that needs to implement the CPTD. The CPTD is the one that makes sure that they have skills enough, they are empowered, they have knowledge enough to empower to these children. Hence, I started to be interested in this because as I'm working with these children, I realized that we need children that will be critical thinkers. We need children that will be innovators, but are the people that are implementing the CPTD giving the right information to them? The topic comes from there. Let me take you through what I'll be giving you. So that will be the content outline. One will have the orientation of the study, the introduction of the study, the background of the study, then the research design, how do we come up with that? The methodology, which is very important, the results and the finding. And we recommend some of the things to happen because we are interested in this future, which is called the learners and the children. So we'll start one, the orientation. The Department of, so I'm doing this so that you can understand the context of the South African education system. So the Department of Education, its aim is to constantly develop the teachers, improve them, and make sure that they are empowered, they are motivated, they are trained well in order for them to be able to stand in front of these children, which are the learners, and receive the education that will make them to be better, that will make them to be better people, that will make them to survive in the future. So the Department of Education came up with a standardized CPTD, which is a program that they have to follow. In the standardized CPTD that they had to follow, they gave it to SACE. SACE stands for the South African Council of Educators. That is the professional body. That professional body, the teacher's role there is to make sure that they monitor the CPTD program, they manage it for the educators, but they change the CPTD program and make it a CPTD system. In them making it a system, they came with a prescription to say all educators needs to develop or needs to have a file that they will keep in order for them to personally develop themselves. But now they cannot do that until they read and understand the integrated quality management system, which is the vehicle that they are using in order for them to understand what are the documents needed, what are the processes that are needed, what are the procedures and the responsibility in order to achieve this quality education they have to give to the students. So in that, the CPTD now, because this is just the process of tracking you, of making sure that you're documenting every skill, every new skill that you acquire, every knowledge and the experience as you work also count. But they have put, which is the Department of Education, they've put leadership in place. The leadership will be their district office. The leadership also will be their principals at schools or the HOD for the subject that they are doing. They have put them in order for them to balance. In order for those teachers or educators to have the knowledge and skills, they need to give it to the learners in such a way that our learners end up being critical thinkers. Our learners end up being innovators. With this COVID-19 happening, everybody needs now. And we need a computer. You need to make sure you've got a good device to be able to handle the things that are happening. And all that, it needs to come up from the teachers or the educators that are training these students or the learners. The introduction of the story, it always starts with the problem. What is the problem? If everything is in place, starting from the Department of Education straight to the learners, and everybody is using the IQMS as a vehicle to the CPTD. So what is the problem? The problem is the implementation of this continuous professional development. That is the problem. So if it is the problem, what is the purpose of this study? This study is to, one, it needs to determine, it needs to describe the essence of the lived experiences of educators. And these educators are in the Johannesburg West District High School. So the significance of the study, it contributed to the description of the lived experiences of educators within this Johannesburg West District High School. The background of the study. The background, worldwide now we're studying, it's the number of such research are starting to happen. People are studying, or educators, researchers are starting now to come forth to see exactly in education, what is it that we can do and what is it that we can do better. But when Human Science Research Council in 2018 revealed that South Africa has got the poor compared to other African countries, that got me standing up. In 2018, that's when I started the study to say, how can it be that we think in South Africa we are better than the other African continent? But the problem of that, it was the module of CPTD that we're using. The module that we're using, it's limited, and the researcher compared to that, it says that other countries, even not in Africa itself, but your Japan, your United States, your Canada, they are doing it because they have a lot of this, but in South Africa, we do not have. In the study that was done by Onu and Sehole, they said that the reason is because there is a gap, or there is a line that is separating human beings, to say there is a group that is rich, there is a group that is poor. There are people that are living in the first world, and there are people that are living in the third world. And it happens that in South Africa, we are even in that. And that put us into the advantage, because now the evidence is showing that the performance of this education system is failing us. And in South Africa, CPD is directly to the institution. So when the Department of Education gives it, when they give it to the district office give it to school for them to go and to move with this process. While in other countries, the knowledge, that you have to make sure that there is no gap, there is no deficit in this. If you are giving knowledge to the teachers, and the teachers have to do the same thing to the learners, it needs to be taken good care of. So this is an important thing. CPTD is very important in educators, because now if the educators are not getting it correctly, then the learners will come out without knowledge and the skills that they require in their life. Then no matter how the good training of teachers is, it does not get the teachers to be able to go out there. You get into the class, they don't teach you. They don't teach you that when you get into the class and you find a different caliber of student or a different caliber of learners, what do? It's never enough. Hence, it requires the continuous development. It needs to, that's what motivated me to endeavor in the study, to say, I will have to look exactly and get a better picture of what is happening in this country, which is South Africa, concerning all the initiatives which are done for the CPTD. So now the question is, all right, CPTD, the educators, and all these educators are in one area, which is the western side of Roodepoort. What is the problem? What is the question? As a researcher, because all research begins with the question, what is the question? The question is, what are the lived experiences of these educators? So if we need to find the lived experiences, let me take you to this chart that I have there. There are 6 points where I need to cover. One, what is it? So it's a CPTD phenomena. So we've got this phenomena that is not working, but it's there in our country. And why is that? The phenomena, it's there so that we can develop, we can know what happened in between the implementation in order to make the teachers not to become, according to the Department of Education, not to become skillful and not to have enough knowledge of what they are teaching. Where was this done? This was done in the area of the Johannesburg West District. And when it was done during 2018, late 2018, and in the middle of like September 2020. This study was done during that period. And who was involved? The people that were involved there are the educators themselves. And how? The how that is here, it can be in both sides. How did you find out how did you do the measure, which is the methodology. How did you now answer the question that you have asked and posed according to the research? So the research question here, with the research question, you say the population was 10, and the significance of the sample size and the secondary schools which were done, it's not the same 10. Secondary schools was given when the Department of Education, when you do your theoretical or ethical consideration, they will have to give you a letter to say, we approve you to go into the western side to make a research. When you go into that western side, you still have to go through district, which district now will inform the schools. So the number and the list of the schools that I used, which were 10, is just the number 10 because those are the 10 high schools in the Johannesburg West District. Sample size was 10. The study is a qualitative study. And if it's a qualitative and it has a phenomenology study, 10 is the maximum, and it can be a minimum of less than 10. So the educators were selected, and those that were selected because, one, they participate in the CPTD that is happening, and they know the activities that they need to follow. And you will think that in a school, because the number of educators in one school is between 30 and 35, and that is our high school, meaning grade 8 to 10. You would think at least 10% is following the CPTD activities or is part of the activities. No, it was not like that. You find a lot of them, they are not even partaking of the CPTD. They're not even developing themselves. They're not even trying to. The reason is because of the implementation that has happened. So the study uses a purposeful sampling techniques. The strategy referred to as a subjective. So as it is a subjective study, then you must check now, what are the credibilities that are out there? What is your trustworthiness? So the trustworthiness of the study was ensured. It was ensured through the application that Gupta and Lincoln are using, the 4D, and I also use the Costa 2020, which Costa 2020 also uses the TACU in this. So the TACU belongs to Dr. Costa, and the Costa is hinged upon the thematic analysis. So what are these trustworthiness? Your credibility. Are you telling the truth? Is it truth value that you are giving out there? The transferability, if now you apply the same scenario, the same way you have done your methodology, or you will follow your methodology, or you'll do your design, research design, when you take it to another school or another area, not in Western, will it be applicable to that? It is dependable. Will it be consistent? So those are the things that you have to answer when you're a researcher. And the confidentiality. As I said that because this is a study of qualitative study. The qualitative study and its phenomenology. So the biasness is called bracketing. Just when you know now that you're supposed to do the phenomenology study, you need to start bracketing. Bracketing, what does bracketing do? It removes the things that you know, the notions that you came up with. It removed everything that you know, because you have to walk in there to find the answer, not to be looking for it, not to come up there with your own opinions. So TACU, which is true value, applicable, consistent, and biases. So we move into the rigor. Rigor, it's very important. Do not lose. When you follow the method that you're using, an audit trial, it's simply like an audit in accounting where you need to know. So that means you must keep your documents of how did you do what you did and why did you do what you did. So we come to the ethical now, ethical research. The ethical research is before you even do anything, the Department of Education now has given you a go-ahead. Go to this school. Then the district also said, we'll give you another letter to go to the school. Now you are ready to meet your participants. What are you doing with the participants? Your participant, you must make sure you respect. More than anything, these people are helping you as much as when you're done with your research, they will see you, they will see the research helping them, but you go there and respect human dignity. How do you do that? One, you must make sure that confidentiality is done. I called mine in this research study, teacher 1, teacher 2, so that I do not associate the words with the people that were speaking. Then you go to non-maleficence. Non-maleficence is the one that you are not going to harm them. They will be telling you things because now you want to get these live experiences, and everybody has got their own live experiences with CPTD. After they have told you, do not harm them, you find yourself now you're going to the principal to report, but make sure that you take care of them right from the beginning, right to the end of your research. What are the benefits? The benefits of this study will be, 1, I want to make sure that once I am done with this, you take the findings back to the Department of Education, the Department of Education that will now take it back to the SACE, and SACE must try to find better ways to implement the CPTD in order for the educators to keep on developing themselves. This is a changing world. The only thing that is affected, the only thing that is always happening, it's change. So they also need to change with the world. Justification, we need to make sure that the researcher treat everybody as they should be. So now what is the design method? The philosophy of this. Philosophy of the research is hinged upon this position. So your philosophy, you need to position yourself and know exactly what is this that you're going to study and which method and philosophy are you going to anchor everything that you're doing. So this study is based on the interpretivist paradigm, and it's a subjective world because it's of human experiences. You're dealing with humans here, and ethics has shown you that you need to take care of them. You need to convince them and show them that, hey, I will make sure that nobody sees your name attached to any statement. You will confidential, and I will not tell anybody. They need you to know that. The approach of this one, it's a logical reasoning approach. So this one is also the interpretivist. It needs to make sure that the researcher is able to make conclusions. How do you draw conclusion in examining and the data pattern? You need to have a proper and a correct research approach. So the methodology, as I've been saying, that your method that is coming, it is the qualitative. What does it mean when I said the method is the qualitative? As a researcher or as a student, you need to know there are two types, quantitative and qualitative. So we are using qualitative research, and in qualitative research, there are research design. And this research design, Dr. Elizabeth was doing a narrative research. I will be doing a phenomenology research, which is the phenomenology theory. There are case studies, there are grounded theories, ethnography, action, and history. And all those are the stuff that you need to know as the researcher before you even start researching, in order to make sure that the method that you choose is the best method of your research. The design, phenomenology. So now I said, like, in this research design, phenomenology was the one. But again, there are type of phenomenologies. You know, you'll have your descriptive, you will have your hermeneutic, you'll have your interpretive phenomenology analysis, and you'll have your template. You need to be reading all those to understand which method is the best. Students normally come to the lecturers. Students will come to the mentors and ask, which method must I use? it is your responsibility to make sure that you understand this. In the phenomenology, you will have your transcendent, you will have hermeneutic, you will have the phenographer. These are the types. So every time you separate what you need to do, you need to follow. If I choose this, is this the best? Yes, phenomenology is the lived experience. So according to my research, it was the best for the research. Data collection, semi-structured questions were populated in that, just to guide the interview, because now you want to know the question of the research, you must always go back to it. What are the lived experiences of educators? You go back to that question. And when you draw the questions, you draw it in such a way that at least you guide your interview, but allow them to tell you, these are the people that have lived this life. These are the people. So in these people living this life, you need to allow them to give you everything. And the codes that came out, your code strategy that came out, the emotions, they will tell you, they will tell us, but my HOD doesn't want to help me with my PDP. And it's not the HOD responsibility. It is your responsibility as an educator, but that's what they believe. So you get the emotions coming up, the in vivo. That's the one that you directed straight from the statement of the participant. The value coding, the beliefs. If you're my boss, you must do things for me. They have different beliefs. And in this different belief, those are the things that you need to pick up. And the descriptive coding, that's the one that I was doing. There's quite a lot of the strategy. I think it's 30 plus. And you need to make sure that you read them each one by one so that you understand and you know exactly which ones belong to your research. So in all your research, make sure that you understand which areas and which content now are we going to use. Under content analysis, we've got descriptive. After descriptive, we've got the thematic analysis. In your thematic analysis, this is the one that we're going to generate themes and conclude with them. So we are going to use that as our analysis. So let's move to the next one. If our analysis is that, how do you do that? Now the data you've got. We did interviews. The interviews was in voice. You need now to transcribe the interview into the text because the text is what you're going to use. So you transcribe it, it becomes the text. You immerse yourself into this mess. You read it, you read into it. You read every day. This is what was taking long because when I was doing it, mine was manual. Once I was done in September, there was a web QDA, which makes things easier than what I have done because I had to do everything manually. Now you start to highlight because you have immersed yourself into reading. You have listened and hear what they were saying. So now you sit down, you read word by word, you read line by line, you read today. You go back and listen to the interviews so that you can pick up some of the things that you did not pick. That's when stage one starts to happen. You come up with things. These are the words that came out. The words, one word came out. There are no workshop to do it. So the implementation of CPTD, if there is no workshop, how do they expect the educators to do, to empower themselves, to develop themselves, to grow? So those are the words, the development. There is no development that is happening here. And how can we have the best learners if the teachers or the educators themselves are not the best? HOD came out bold and big. And the HOD, it means now they are blaming the leadership to saying, but the leadership is not assisting. The leadership is not helping in the PDP that we are supposed to follow and to have. And there is a lack of that. The teachers are complaining. There is no attendance. So I remember one time I asked, why are you not attending? Because there is a list of workshops. Then the educator said, You cannot just stand up and go to the workshop simply because when you leave your learners, nobody takes care of them. So you come back with the curriculum that you have, you are behind. So what they do is they focus on the children and they forget about themselves. So now all these words are coming in. You need now to go to your second stage. In your second stage, that's where now you create themes about all these words. This is very fascinating. This is what it brings the core. This is what brings the essence of the qualitative research, to read and feel emotions while you're reading it and see all those things. Yours you have taken out. Because according to me, it was like, no, this teacher needs to be good. This teacher needs to be the best. So I have taken all that and I'm imagining myself into what they are saying. And I am reading. I cannot be, because I do not understand or I do not attend the workshop. So you come now, you do the themes. The themes, you start to group them. Because of the number of themes, you need to start creating the frequency. How many times did that word show up in your data analysis? And we find that in the final things, this is what will be discussed now. You need to do your final things. In your final things, that's where now you can see that there was no induction. I started coming here, I started teaching here, but nobody has given me induction, including the district office. Those are the teachers speaking. And one say, we do not even have mentors, because the teachers or the ones that have been in the system forever or for a long time will say, I cannot be helping you, because now we're living in the different times. The children are different, I can't even handle, and everything is happening. So you need to make sure that you support the availability of that. The leadership support, that one came out big. The leadership support, one, it's the district itself. So the district of Johannesburg West need to assist the teachers in order for them to create, and needs to take them through the CPTD system in order for them to become the better ones, in order for them to understand what new skills, what skills and what knowledge do I need in order for me to give back to the student. And now we came to the lack. Look at how big the number, the frequency is. 51%, it says the lack of CPTD. Lack of CPTD simply means that there is nothing happening, or I cannot do anything. Those are the educators telling the story about that. So before we go into our results, let's look, what is the significance? What will the CPTD do? Nelson Mandela, Dr. Nelson Mandela's quote, which is beautiful. It says, it is not beyond our power. So that means we have power. We do have power to create a world in which all our children, I always used to say, we have studied and we did not make it. Now these new students, or the students, have got the virtual things. Look at what your institution is doing for you. You are here because now they are giving back. They are empowering you. So that means we can do better. And he said, those who do not believe in this have the small imagination. So it shows that AQRA has got a big imagination to go through it. You can see and look at the student and say, this learner, look at the books he's carrying. They look heavy, and you're thinking, where is he even going to put this book? Are this book not even going to be worth? But yes, because of the future that we must have, the learners or the children needs to get the best of the best education. So now our themes, these are our themes. The themes I've already discussed, the 51%, which is your leadership support. The next thing is the disinterest and unwillingness. Where does that one come from? One, when there are workshops, the educators always say, I could not go because my students were writing a test and exam, and I did not have a tutor, a teacher to help me. And the other one said, no, but I'm already 63. In 2 years' time, I'll be living here. So why am I even bothering myself? It also came out that this CPTD system, it's all about this 1% that they need to get after 3 years. And the educators were like, in 3 years' time, 1% of my salary, I can make it without the 1% that I have. So now let's look at the findings. Before we look at the findings, we need to go back and remember our question. What are the lived experiences? The lived experiences as explained by the educators, the lived experiences that were said by the educators only in the western side of Roodepoort. Mentorship vacuum, disinterest and unwillingness. They're not just interested. I mean, I've tried others. I remember one even said, I have been studying, and because this 1% that you get on the CPTD, it's after 3 years, and I've been doing now my master's, and it's the 4th year. That means I have forfeited my 3rd year. So I'm not going to do it anymore. I will sit also and do what I need to do because there's too much admin work. But the leadership support is very important. The Department of Education needs to look back and say, what support can we give back to our people? What support do they really need? Now, this is the world of technology. Most of them don't even have any gadget. The gadget that they have is a cell phone. Sometimes the cell phone don't even open up all the apps, don't even open up everything that you want to see. So those are the things that needs to be looked into and needs to be changed by our Department of Education. Then the findings of our study. The findings of our study, I hope it's be able to add to the existing literature, because the more study that they were doing, it was the challenges of the CPTD, challenges of the CPTD. Why CPTD? Is CPTD working in our area? So those were done, but it was not done in this qualitative research manner in order to get exactly what they feel and how they will be implementing the one that they want. So in your recommendation, or in the recommendation of the study, it was said that one, to address the need of educators concerning the CPTD. So if we address that portion, one of the things that they were struggling with, they don't even have the gadget, they don't have a laptop, they don't have a phone, but they are expected to use a CPTD system that says has take the program and make it into the system without empowering the educators to say, what if you do not know IT? What if you do not know how to use the computer? But some of those things are there. So if they create a workshop to teach them how do you operate computers, they cannot leave the class. So it becomes a challenge. How can they address this in order for our educators to be empowered, to be the ones that are giving the best to our learners? The information system. Because SAIS has taken the CPTD system and put it into the system, now they need to make sure that the ITC is in place. If an educator needs to log in, they've got a place to log in. If the educator needs to use the system, they've got. And most of the schools, they don't even have a computer themselves, or they only have one computer for the administrators. So the teachers cannot use it. And when I was asking, I remember one time I asked, do you guys not even have internet cafes where you can go probably and see and try to use this? They say like now, but no, the internet cafes, you will find learners who are doing their assignment, students who are doing their assignment, they are also. So it's packed there for them to be able to also use the development and the quality of response-based leadership. If the HOD and the principal, they are complaining and say, my responsibility is to make sure that everybody's in class, everybody's in school, all the educators are teaching accordingly. Where will I get time to assist the other educator? Where will I get time to look at even their plan? One of the principal even said, you know, I don't even sometimes open up this PDP plan. I asked them, what did you do? When did you do it? All right, okay, so 1 year, and they sign, and they send it to the district, who also don't even ask questions, who signs and bring it back. So it's more of the admin work than anything else. So the research will contribute. With contribution, it will contribute to this new and relevant insight to say, what is it that our country can do? What is it that in South African content we can do better to assist our educators? Education is very important, so it needs to be looked at. And I have seen it because as I work with these children, you can see as you teach them that these children are willing to receive when they are taught. They are willing to change when they are taught. But why were the educators not doing what the children want? The last one, as a researcher, I recommend that if the research is being done in the Western side, let us continue with this research and see that if we do it on another province or if we do it on another district, will we find the lived experiences the same, or this is just happening in this area of West Rand? Thank you very much for your time. With the quote, never stop learning because life never stop teaching.
Our heartfelt thanks, Dr. Thusi. I would like to introduce here Chona Ramos. She is our panelist, and she is faculty of Mountain View College in South Philippines. She is also working on her dissertation in which she uses transcendental phenomenology. And so, yes, Chon, this is now your time.
Greetings, everyone, from the southern part of the Philippines and from our college, Mountain View College. Thank you, Dr. Nisi, for a very enlightening presentation. Thank you for sharing with us your research. It gave us a glimpse of what South African education system is. And many countries actually uses CPD or CPTD in your country.
Yeah.
And if implemented properly, it's a very excellent program. So I'm happy to know that you're using phenomenology, specifically hermeneutic phenomenology. And I have two questions which will focus on data gathering and data analysis. What makes phenomenology unique is that it, in some proponents, present a phenomenological interview when we do our interview, and in your study you did semi-structured interview. One of those known proponents for interviews in phenomenology is Seidman and also Van Manen. May I ask if you use certain formats in your interview when you gathered your data?
All right, according to the format is, because it was a semi-structured, what I wanted to know is, that's why I could tell when I was collecting the information that 4 were males, 4 were males and 6 were females. That was just the framework in order for me to guide. You know, when you get there, they can speak about anything else, that the stuff that you didn't even ask them. So I wanted to guide them because the answer of what are the lived experiences had to be answers. So I frame it based on that to say, if this answer is answered based on what are the lived experiences, then it becomes a better one. So I frame it on the semi-structure to make sure that I get to the respond in connection with the lived experiences, nothing more.
Thank you. Were there, this is a follow-up question on data gathering, were there participants who supported their answers in the interview in other forms, like to better express their experience, they provided you with other forms of data in their answer to the interview, like they express themselves through writing poems or drawings or music? And
No. When I was doing my interview, the thing that came out more were the coding, the strategy. So the Saldana strategies, the ones that it says, the emotion. So a lot of them, I have picked up that they've got anger to say, I've been a teacher for years and I went through the CPTD programs and none of them is working for me. So you find that most of them have picked up that emotion and the descriptive now to describe how do they do that. And others, you can pick it up from their language, because we have 13 official languages in South Africa. They will immediately swap from English and speak their home language. Then you know that that person is already angry. They do not want you to ask them any question. But because it was that, and I have the ethical consideration that I've done to say, do not worry, that's exactly what I want. I want you to tell the truth of how you feel. Do not hide it. So that was covered in the strategy, the coding strategy for their emotion. Nobody at the end, because now if you take care of them before and after, I also had to go back and check, how are they doing? The funny thing was, they were expecting me to come with the results. They said, we are waiting for these results. We want to see whether, is it our school or is it all the schools in Western? And I'm happy to tell you that I've already presented the findings in one of the schools. And I have told them that, what is CPTD? My first slide that was starting from the Department of Education down to the learners. Most of the educators did not see it in that way, to say, no, man, I just thought, they just want us to work and to study forever. Now I understand what they are doing. They are giving you knowledge. They are making sure that if you have any skills that you are lacking, it is free. Go ahead. There's a program that covers that and that you need to do. So it has enlightened them, and they have changed their perception now to say, oh, CPTD is not there to harm us, but it's there to help us. And it's there to make sure that we learn and we become better educators or teachers for our future children.
That is wonderful, because that's the main point of phenomenology. Like, we let the readers and as well as the participants grasp the depth of the experience, the phenomenon.
Yes.
So my last question is on data analysis. I understand you use the Costa model for your data analysis. For
Yes.
hermeneutic phenomenology, one of the the known proponents is Max van Manen. I think you've heard or you've read his books, and he also presented a data analysis framework. May I respectfully ask, how is the Costa model similar with or different from Van Manen's model in data analysis?
All right, the Costa model, because it was also taken from Saldanha, which a lot of researchers are doing. So there's a portion of the Costa model that is already in the other researchers, because in the Costa model, they tell you right from the beginning to say, now, before you even collect your data, what are the things that you need to do? Once you have that, it's when now you start to immerse yourself into this data. And these are the standard. I think most of the researchers are following the same guideline. It only changes because now the researchers are using different gurus. And the next step is now theme. The Costa model is using thematic analysis, because now you had to come up with your theme. You don't walk in with your themes. Then once you have your themes, you need to follow the second stage, where you do your sub-themes to get your final themes. In imaging all of that, calculating your frequency, how many times did it show? So the difference between the two, I will say, if I had to give it a percentage, I will give it 60%. That's the difference. Costa is theirs.
Thank you. What makes you cited Costa and Saldanha? I think I got it. And on the other hand, what makes Van Manen's data analysis framework unique in a way, especially when it's used for hermeneutic phenomenology, is in the when you have with essential themes, it
Yes.
it is presented using different life world elements. So it could be
Oh, yes.
on time, on space, on material, and there are other elements. But thank you so much for sharing that. And it I'm hoping that through your study, your co-workers in the education, in the field of education in South Africa and specifically in your district will understand deeper and more and will see this lived experiences in a different level. Thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
thank you so much, Dr. Thusi. We appreciate your presentation and of course, the question and answer with Chona. Thank you, Chon. Our time now here in my timepiece is 7 o'clock, and that means we have to go. We would like to say sorry to our participants who have posted some questions here. Uh, Very good questions, but we do not have time. You see here, we continue with the conversation, and this is not the only time that we will present phenomenology. We still have, I think in February, that's fourth Thursday of February. One of the presentations is transcendental. That time it will be transcendental, but I'm sure you will be interested. So now this is time now to end our presentation, but I would like to give time to, here, I'm happy to announce for our February 11 event, that is AQRA Virtual Colloquium number 9. We have a guest, Katarina Brandao. She is part of the World Conference on Qualitative Research, and she's going to present Researching Leadership Processes with the support of CACDAS. CACDAS is Computer Assisted Qualitative Data Analysis Software. So those of you who want to learn how to analyze, this is not really the how, she will just be showing her work, and this time she is focusing on in vivo. In the future, we hope to get somebody who will present how we analyze data using WebQDA that is coming in the near future. Now I would like to invite Dr. King Costa, who will introduce to us an online interview platform.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Dr. Can you stop sharing?
Oh, yes.
Dr. King would like to share something.
I see.
Okay.
All right. Let me just put up my screen there. And right. I hope you see my screen. Thank you so much, Dr. Sally. I'll take 1 minute and a half, perhaps, just to share the inspiration we got from the presentation of Dr. Aseli, Dr. Safare Wambaleka, and Dr. Pavel, who talked about new methods of collecting data in the event of COVID-19 and probably other future restrictions that we might find ourselves faced with. It is clear that qualitative research, which really is about this richness of experiences or intersubjectivity between the researcher and the research participants, is being limited by concepts such as social distancing and obviously COVID-19. It limits coming together. So as we know that we now do a lot of interviews using tools like Skype, Zoom, GoTo, WebEx, and quite a number of them, but there has been still a challenge using those platforms for focus groups. So I love Dr. Pavel's presentation and Dr. Asedi as well, and Safari, where they talked about asynchronous interviews using an online platform. So we developed what you are seeing here, a platform which is a social network that is very, very similar to what you would see in Facebook, except that it gives you a safe space and it gives your participants a safe space. So you could, for instance, if you look at this, there's a homepage timeline where you put up your profile, and then it tells about what this society is about. But what I love most is the focus group because if you click there on the focus group, or you can do a particular poll, you can do polls as well. But the focus group helps you to be able to collect your data. You can see I'm starting a new focus group, for instance, on these are two groups, but I'm starting a new one now on collecting data about vaccine perceptions. That's why I asked the panelists earlier. So this is something I would like you, family, to test. Go to mygcard.net and probably just try and register there. It's free of charge. It's a social network. It's a tool that you could use. And let's see how it goes. Remember, with asynchronous focus groups, so you can actually allow your participants, after selecting them and talking about ethical considerations, allow them to post stuff in response to your question at different times. So you would want perhaps to structure your questions. And if you go there and register, I'll open the space for my focus group so that you can just see how it works. But basically, this is a project that is in development. It's an exciting tool to share with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. King Costa, and we are glad that your initiative really has produced this kind of software. I am honored to introduce to you Dr. Elizabeth Reilly, my good friend. And Dr. Reilly is professor and past chair of educational leadership in the School of Education at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, California, USA. As a TK-12 classroom teacher and administrator, Dr. Reilly principally served in urban schools and school districts. An internationally recognized scholar investigating women in educational leadership, Dr. Reilly works with leaders of multinationals, government, non-governmental organizations, and education on 5 continents. She is author and co-author of numerous publications, including Women Leading Education Across the Continents, Finding and Harnessing the Joy in Leadership, dated 2018. She co-edited this one with Dr. Rochelle McNay from New Zealand and published by Rowman and Littlefield Education. I would like to say something more about Women Leading Education Across the Continents. This is a group of women committed to empowering one another from different parts of the world. And I'm very happy I'm part of this, has been nurtured by this group, been inspired to continue my work in education. And we are happy that Dr. Reilly is here. She's one of those women who is very prominent in her influence in this group. It's my joy to present to you our speaker, Dr. Reilly, in her presentation, Rwandan Women in Higher Education, Socio-Cultural Challenges and Opportunities. And you'll find out that she has done great work, and what has interested me are both, the content and also her methodologies. She used narrative inquiry, and perhaps it will help you to appreciate, her efforts. Where Dr. Reilly is, she's now in California. It is 1 o'clock in the morning. So Dr. Reilly, we welcome you. We are very honored that you are here. You have now the time.
Thank you so much, my dear friend, Dr. Arceli. I am so happy to be here with all of you and to present to you some of my work. As Dr. Arceli said, my work spans the globe. I have the privilege of working in many different countries throughout the world, and Rwanda is just one of the many more recent countries that I've been able to work. I was supposed to be in Senegal this past year, as well as in Pakistan for studies, and because of the pandemic, that has not stopped, but slowed down. And I think one of the things that we might want to talk about later on is how one can continue the international research even when there is a pandemic. We've come up with some very creative ways. One of my doctoral students just completed her data gathering in Senegal by some very creative means. And so the work can continue. And I feel it's a privilege to be able to share the stories about one of the women that I've worked with in Rwanda. And we'll share also about the theoretical framework that I have been working with to think about how to frame these conversations about what's happening, not just in Rwanda, but in a number of other countries where I work. And also, as Dr. Arceli mentioned, talking about the methodological choices that we make as scholars when we're conducting research. So let's begin and talk a bit about Rwanda. Let me see if I can get this to move forward. There we go. So I think it's really important to recognize that, and we'll talk about this in just a moment, we are one day past the international remembrance of the Holocaust, and we're talking about Germany here. But we are also on the precipice of remembering the Rwandan genocide. So I'll mention more about that in a moment. But it's really important to understand that there is, in Rwanda, an important consideration about how we think about our relationships with other people, because they have experienced such dire circumstances of the death of so many. And I think you'll be interested to know that with Rwanda, that you'll see that there are some key things that will help set the context for our conversation about what is happening with women leaders in that country. I'll also spend a bit of time talking about how I construct narratives using narrative inquiry. And I will also mention some things about the findings and what we've been learning through our work in Rwanda. If you look in the top left corner of this slide, you'll notice how Rwanda is situated in Africa. And it is surrounded by, it's a landlocked country surrounded by 4 other countries, 2 of which tend to be fairly unstable. Burundi and the Democratic Republic of Congo can have quite a bit of political instability. Uganda, a little bit more stable, and Tanzania, the same. And so what we know about Rwanda, to help you understand some context, is that it is landlocked. It's in sub-Saharan Central Eastern Africa. It is 11 times larger, or 11 times smaller than the Philippines. So if you are living in the Philippines at present, that should give you some context for how tiny of a place it is. It has over 11 million people. Interesting to note that it is a country that is principally Christian in its orientation, mostly Catholic, quite a few Protestant, interestingly enough, Adventist. So we've got quite a large group of Adventists in the country, and some Muslims, some indigenous belief. Most of the people with whom I work in Rwanda speak English fluently, but the language is Kinyarwandan. They used to speak French, but there has been quite a fallout with the French and the Belgians following the genocide. So French is not taught any longer as a second language. English is the preferred language. As I mentioned, the genocide happened now almost 27 years ago, as of this coming April. And one thing that's important to understand about the genocide is that following it, I mean, there are some really terrible facts about it. One is that we believe that upwards to 1 million people perished in 100 days. And so fully 1/4 of every year in Rwanda is spent in the remembrance period. It commences in April and goes through June. And so during that time, there will be many ceremonies at the genocide memorial. You will see people holding prayer services. There will be marches, all kinds of ways to think about. And so I often invite people to reflect and to think about those who have died in this terrible, terrible tragedy. What also is important to understand is that the genocide affects everything in Rwandan civil society today. The issues that I'm most interested in examining globally are the issues of gender equity. And what I know about all the countries I work in, whether it's Afghanistan or Costa Rica or Pakistan, or in this case, Rwanda, that gender equity is memorialized in their constitution. And it is a cross-cutting issue with its policies and its plans for the country. One thing that I learned as I began considering going to Rwanda to investigate the progress of women in leadership was whether this work had been done at all. And what I learned fairly quickly is that, and you may even know about this about Rwanda, is that the parliament has about 63, 65% women. That is the largest number of women in a parliament or in a legislature in the world. So that gets a lot of wonderful press. But one of my questions was, so where is the progress in other parts of civil society besides in the governmental section? And I'll talk a little bit later on about approvals and how we protect human subjects, particularly in work like this, where I often work in some countries that I would say are a bit fragile, right? Genocide, yes, that creates a circumstance. But what we learned is that this work had not been done at all, that it is considered a landmark study. So what was I doing? I was looking at the status of women scholars. It turns out when I work in many different countries that I don't often know quite until I touch down what will be available to me in terms of the opportunities to interview people. And so one thing that I do try to do in advance is begin some document gathering. What are national plans, national policies that relate to issues of gender, to education, to women in leadership? And those become one of the fundamental ways that I try to think about learning about a country. Another thing that's really important in international research is that you consider yourself principally a learner, that you are there to learn from people, you are a guest. And while most countries consider the guest close to God effectively, that we are considered honored and we're welcomed in the country, we are guests, and that our knowledge of the culture is limited. We may not speak what their primary language is. And so I always think about the importance of being mindful. And I'll talk more about this with narrative inquiry in a bit, that it's an invitation for us to think about how we will approach our work with people. I conduct semi-structured interviews, which means that I have a set of questions that I want to touch on about progress, successes, challenges that women are facing. But I also want to invite people to expand upon the things that they share, depending on what their interests are, we may go in a lot of different directions in terms of their own past experiences, their educational experiences, their work in leadership, their perspectives on how the country is faring. And so semi-structured interviews for me give me an opportunity to explore with people different directions. I also take contemporaneous field notes, and I do it in two ways. One is I will type things, and I'll just type what my observations are of a circumstance, my thoughts about an interview once it's concluded. But I also will use voice memos. And this is something that I've begun using more and more, because sometimes just talking out loud helps to solidify and clarify for you as the investigator what you're noticing, what your questions, what your concerns are. And with voice memos, it's very easy to transcribe them then and use them as part of your data set. I've been working with Bourdieu and Passeron's work on cultural capital and cultural reproduction theory for several years now. And I don't have time in this presentation to talk about some of the challenges, but perhaps at another point, if I'm able to work with you further and share with you, I can share how I am working on reifying these French perspectives, French European perspectives, to expand our understanding and thinking about issues of class, cultural attitudes, economics, and so on, to apply those in a broad sense using universal human rights to understand what people's needs are in civil society. So this is an important thing to think about, not so much what theory one chooses as a scholar, but rather, are you willing to explore different types of theories to ground your thinking and to help you extrapolate the different sorts of assumptions that you have about the work that you're doing. So this is how I've approached this particular study, is using their thinking to underlie the notion of civil society. But something else that I've done is I've worked with narrative inquiry. And why I like this is because I believe it presents an opportunity to honor in important ways the work that and the stories of our participants. So I'm going to talk a little bit about three different aspects: the beginning of the story, living the story, and writing the story. So Nell Noddings talks about the notion of creating a sense of community that cares. And that certainly is a value that is part of the university that's hosting us today. It's part of the value in my own institution, which happens to be a faith-based institution as well, and it's Catholic in its orientation. And so Noddings talks about the importance of creating that caring community, which means that if I am a visitor in another country, I need to be mindful and respectful of the culture, that I am there as a learner, and I need to be mindful in advance of my arrival in that country about how I will think about conversing with people, how I will think about questioning them, how I will try to navigate the norms and the many challenges that I will face as a newcomer to that country. So that is the first part. But then what happens is something that is very, very powerful in narrative inquiry, and that happens with most of us when we engage in research that involves interviews. If you think sometimes about an interview is being asked a question, and then you give a response. What I strive to do when I am talking with someone is to move past an interview and to engage in an authentic conversation where we are sharing in deep ways, where we establish trust, and we're able to feel safe to share our stories. What happens then is that living that story means that you and I in that conversation, or even if, for example, we're conducting a focus group, we begin to be the story together. It's no longer just one person talking to another and relaying their story, but rather we are co-constructing a narrative together. And so that's what I strive to do in this center part of the story. In the third part of the story, this is when the writing happens. And I think what's important here for me is that I spend time, as I mentioned, reflecting, writing, considering what I've learned from that individual, that I listen to the recordings of our conversations, that I read the transcripts of the conversations multiple times, that I conduct a member check where I provide the transcripts back to the person who's been interviewed and invite them to add, amplify any of their points, for example, as well as to consider what exactly might need to be removed. Perhaps they've decided they don't want to share something that they've already put on the record. So that member check allows us to continue to co-construct the story together as I'm beginning to develop the narrative. The analytical process then is not a one-shot set of steps, but rather there is a process that goes on where I revisit the research question, I listen to the interviews, and I organize things by topics, themes. I also begin to revisit the assumptions and the precepts that are embedded in the theoretical framework that I've chosen to use, as well as I look back on the key themes that emerged from the existing literature, which serve as the foundational background to our problem. We understand the question we have today within the context of what's happened before us. Finally, I write the narrative. I then work on the analyses and discussion, and truly there is a wash, rinse, repeat process that goes on. This is not a linear process. It's very much recursive. I'm just completing, for example, a book chapter right now. I spent hours this evening just before I logged on to be with you, that will be published, I believe, later this year. And it takes a look at my work in Costa Rica, Afghanistan, and in Rwanda. And I have sought in that narrative to combine my understanding of the experiences of women leaders from 3 different countries, obviously 3 continents and 3 very different contexts, using sociocultural capital, again, Bourdieu and Passeron's work. And I keep on rewriting and reflecting and analyzing and moving back and forth. And so this is a long process that it can take when you're dealing with your analysis of the data. How do we establish trustworthiness? I use Shenton's work to talk about 4 aspects of trustworthiness: credibility, transferability, dependability, and confirmability. One of the ways, there are many ways that we establish credibility. I'm just going to highlight 3 of those. And first is that we look at using established methods. And if we're not using established methods for conducting our qualitative research, then we must disclose how it's tentative, how it is experimental. We're trying out new things. We're combining different kinds of perspectives to use our method, but it's important to at least consider that we'll use established methods. Cultural competence. Very, very important that we, again, recognize that as much as possible, we understand the context of the organization, the country, whatever it is where we're working, so that we're able to provide a rich context for understanding the circumstance of those interviews that we've conducted. And of course, triangulation, that can happen in many different ways. One of the ways I find best is to conduct multiple interviews until I reach what I call a saturation point. I start to discern that we're seeing recurring themes. People are starting to say the same thing over and over again. And we know then that we have some level of confidence about, even with the transferability issue. With qualitative research, we know that we're going deep and we're spending quality time with our participants. And consequently, unlike quantitative research, where we're able to provide some broad generalizations, we need to be mindful of how we apply our learning to other contexts, which is why I am thrilled that I'm able to work in so many different countries, because over the period of when I started this work in 2008 until the present time, I've worked in so many different countries that I feel fairly confident about the transferability of what we're learning in each of these countries. Dependability, that happens through looking again repeatedly at our research design, affirming that it is the strongest model we can use in our research. We need to consider the different details. We need to have reflection and so on. Finally, I think with confirmability, one of the important things is to be able to disclose one's biases. Ethical considerations. In the case of the United States, our institutions, we are required to receive approval from our institutional review boards. There are national standards that we must adhere to in conducting research with human subjects. And often our requirements are more stringent than a country that I will be working in. In the case, however, of Rwanda, that was not the case. They have many, many standards, and part of why we learned that my work had not ever happened before in the country is because no one had ever gotten an approval before for this. It's very difficult. They have a number of procedures and policies in place to ensure that human subjects will be protected. There are some political considerations also in the country because, of course, as I mentioned, the genocide is not that long past. So they want to be sure that people are legitimate who conduct research. Confidentiality is one issue that I always need to think about, and that is, will I use people's names or not? So today I am going to use an actual name, and that is because I have the participants' permission to do so. So let me share with you a bit about University of Rwanda and how I ended up and who my sample was. Part of this is what we call snowball sampling, where you can start with one person and they will make a recommendation to you to work with other people. And so frequently when I'm working in other countries, I will ask that very question. If I'm interviewing one administrator, for example, I'll say, do you have recommendations for other people that I might invite? And so in this case, University of Rwanda is the public university. It's got 7 different campuses throughout the country. And that is where I had access originally and first time. And so even though I had hoped to spend more time in the K-12 sector, I was able to spend some, not as much as I would have wished. And so most of this work, and certainly what I'm going to share today, is about the University of Rwanda. They were only established in 2013. putting together their 7 separate universities under one board of governors. They have a vice chancellor who serves as the CEO. And interestingly enough, the vice chancellor is not Rwandan. This is not atypical at the university. A number of the faculty come from other countries, and it's both good news and a challenge for them, because what we want to see is more Rwandans becoming the leaders of the university rather than people from outside the country. So just so you understand a bit about the faculty, there is not a gender parity at this point. So immediately when you look at the issue of there being so many women in parliament, well, that's not the case in other parts of civil society, and certainly not in this governmental sector, where basically less than 25% of the academic faculty are women. This is a fairly typical set of ranks that we see globally. You may have something similar in your country, with the professor being the top rank, and then it goes down from there. Most of the women are at the lecturer rank, which means that they are hoping and aspiring to be promoted, but it's not that easy. It's very, very difficult to gain promotion in Rwanda. Let me share with you a bit about Jeanette. I'm going to end this for just a moment, and I'm going to read to you a narrative about Jeanette. So let me go back into screen sharing and pull up her story. This to me is the heart of our research, is the story that we're able to engage with. And I feel privileged to tell these women's stories. I began the conversation with Jeanette sharing about the context of my work, that I investigate women leaders' progress, successes, and challenges in, I've worked in 3 conflict and post-conflict countries in the last several years. I remarked to her, women, as you know, face very similar challenges throughout the world, and the opportunity presented itself to come to Rwanda about 3 years ago. So it has been a 3-year journey to interview women in leadership roles. Jeanette has worked at the University of Rwanda for 13 years, where she completed her undergraduate degree in social work and was immediately recruited as an assistant lecturer. She holds a master's degree in development from South Korea with a focus on women. In 2010, she completed her PhD in Sweden at the University of Gothenburg in social work, again focusing on women's access to Rwandans' reforms such as inheriting land. This, by the way, was a big deal. Prior to the reforms, women were not permitted to inherit land from their parents, and she wanted to understand the reactions to the reform, where now they could inherit 50% of the family land. The University of Rwanda, she was first affiliated with the School of Social, Political, and Administrative Sciences, and she was transferred to the Center for Gender Studies because of her background in gender and women's rights, where she was appointed to a high-level leadership role. She also serves as chair of one of the 3 district councils in the city of Kigali. But of course, seeking promotion, she must keep up with her teaching and scholarship. She obtained a postdoctorate so that she could receive promotion above the senior lecturer rank, which is her present rank. Her recent postdoctoral work focused on children's rights. She writes, despite these steps toward inclusion, where Rwanda now ranks 5th in the Global Gender Gap Index, girls with disabilities who already grapple with social structures that put them at a disadvantage continue to struggle against male domination in schools. So they respond by either directly or assertively confronting it, or by using more subtle tactics. In doing so, they challenge domination and stereotypes and affirm their capacity for leadership in a male-dominated setting. So let's hear a little bit about what she says about the status of women. Jeanette says that women still face challenges not only in Rwanda, but worldwide. For example, the University of Rwanda, you will see the number of women is significantly lower, with only one tenured full professor through 2018, and that woman is American, not Rwandan. Jeanette is one of few senior lecturers. The number of female university students stands at 33%. We can't expect to have more women in higher education decision-making positions if we continue to have so few women university students. Even with her postdoctoral work completed, Jeanette remains at the senior level, lecturer level. In 2019, however, there are some signs of improvement with women academics. 2 women achieved the rank of associate professor, and for the first time, a Rwandan woman achieved the rank of professor in the College of Medicine. A second challenge Jeanette cites is balancing professional responsibilities with family responsibilities. If you are employed, you must attend professional meetings, as must a man. But for women, if she has young children, she has the responsibility for them. She's a rarity, however. She's achieved academic credentials from 3 continents while pregnant and raising children. She has achieved professional status that suggests more leadership is to come. She states that commitment to goals and dreams is paramount. It used to be said that the diploma of the woman is the husband. And it's all about the culture, she says. The way that they are raised and what culture expects of them affects their dreams. Some women still think that if they have a good husband, they'll be fine, they'll survive. They forget they are capable of something. This is why we have to prepare girls at any age, she's told me, and then they can accomplish a great deal without the husband. I'm going to stop there, and I just want to make sure that I'm not using too much time, and that we, if anyone needs to warn me about the timing, I'll be happy to finish up here. So here's the bottom line, some of the findings. There is a limited pipeline. If more girls are not in universities, then we will have fewer university professors who are women. If the country has to continue to send its PhD candidates out of the country, that is going to limit the number of women. So the essential elements here are that dreams are attained through persistence, resilience, and commitment. Some additional findings, as we heard from Jeanette, the diploma of the woman is the husband. She says that is part of the societal beliefs, but that is something that she believes the country needs to move past. I think one thing that's important is that moving forward, there needs to continue to be this promotion of feminist principles for all of civil society. And there needs to be a strategic plan that specifically addresses the lack of opportunities for women so that they can enter graduate level education and achieve the PhD. One of the key reasons why the women remain at lower ranks is because they don't hold the doctoral degree. So while they can be lecturers or other lower positions, they won't achieve promotion without the doctoral degree. Again, there need to be broader university and national policy that support women academics. I was very impressed to learn the university hosting us today actually has a K-12 school that the students' children can attend. So these are models that other countries have that can help support countries like Rwanda. Let me close with this. The love of a single heart can make a world of difference. This is something that a very famous Rwandan writer talks about. And she lost many family members during the genocide, but she recognizes that as we reach out to other people, we can change people's lives. I appreciate your listening and look forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reilly. This is now time for our question and answer. I will ask a few questions. I am serving now as the panelist, and then after that, we will give time to the questions from our participants today, and Dr. Pavel and Dr. David will facilitate. So, Dr. Reilly, again, our heartfelt thanks for your presentation. I noticed that there is a kind of unity in the research studies that you are conducting. Can you tell us how did you come up with this decision to research on these topics?
Thank you, Dr. Arcelli, for that question. So my international research began in the late 1980s, early 1990s, when I was in my own doctoral studies, and the Soviet Union was on the precipice of collapse. My doctoral chair would support students who wanted to work in the Pacific Rim. A number of my fellow students went to the Philippines, they worked in Thailand, Singapore, Japan. We were just getting back into Vietnam as Americans in the late 80s, early 90s. And so all of these opportunities opened up, but CNN was new. And I noticed that the bread lines were awfully long in Moscow. And I was thinking that if this country, which at that point was looking toward establishing democratic ideals and transforming itself as a communist society into a democratic society, that if that was the case, that we needed to talk about education. And so I ended up conducting my research in 1990, 91, and up through the collapse of the Soviet Union, which ended on Christmas night, 1991, in Moscow, in the Moscow region. It turned out to be the perfect place to work, and that was the beginning. I did go back to the K-12 system for many years as a school leader, and so my research internationally went on hiatus. But when I entered higher education in 2001, that became the opportunity to again establish a research agenda. And because of my interest in international work, I began with studies in China and India, looking broadly speaking at issues of the impact of leadership in a global society. And then in 2007, a doctoral student who was born in Kabul, Afghanistan, asked me if I would be willing to serve as his dissertation chair, and I agreed. And when he first wanted to conduct a quantitative investigation, I said, "What are you talking about? If you want the stories, you need to go back home. And furthermore, I'll go with you." So that's how it began. And it's been going ever since. So sometimes I think, Dr. Arcelli, we need to pay attention to doors that open, and then we need to think about whether we need to walk through them or not. And I have continued to walk through them for many years now and feel very blessed and very privileged.
Mm-hmm. So it seems like you are saying for early career researchers, you are saying that they must have an agenda. Is that it?
Yes, and I think that what's important for rising scholars, and even those of us who are veterans, because we should be always revisiting our agendas. We should be looking for new threads and new directions we might be able to go. And we also need to consider what is our passion. We need to look around us and say, what is worth talking about? What is worth advocating for? What do we notice? And then consider talking with others about that. Of course, you and I have known each other for many years now because we are part of an organization where we all research girls and women in education and in leadership. And so finding an affinity group that allows you to not just work on your own, but to establish partnerships with others is really important. I did this work alone for a lot of years. And when I found the affinity group of women leading education, that became the place where that was my home. And all of you are all over the world, but you're still my home. So I recommend that people do look for affinity groups and that they be willing to risk and try different things. I still don't just research only women in leadership. Sometimes questions come up that I notice. For example, we have a lot of anti-Semitism in the United States. And so I did a study in Southern California about a year back where I examined the impact of faith-based universities on anti-Semitism and what, for example, were Christian universities doing to combat anti-Semitism, if anything. So sometimes an interest will just come up and you'll want to address it. And so, but it is fundamentally important that rising scholars as well as veteran scholars have a pretty good focus so that over time they become known for that work. And others then will want to talk with them about that work, and they can coach and mentor people in that field as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We have several questions here, Dr. Reilly, but let me just ask you, like, why among the different qualitative research designs, why did you use narrative inquiry to study this particular theme about women leadership in, shall we say, disadvantaged environment?
I think narrative inquiries has spoken to me in this context with women in more disadvantaged environments because it fundamentally assumes that their voice needs to be paramount and most important in the story, that allowing them to speak for themselves through what their experiences are honors their voice and gives them agency. I feel that I am merely the conduit. I am the one who has the privilege of being on the global stage, but I have the opportunity to amplify their voices and to tell their stories. Here's an example, right? We've got two women here presenting about work from Africa. And those are very different contexts from where you all are working and living, very different from the context where I live. And yet, because the United States is a multicultural place where we've got people from all over the world, there are many things relevant in that work too, so that principally using narrative inquiry allows us to give voice to all people and to honor them because they matter most. I am merely the delivery mechanism for this.
Thank you. There are several questions here, like about the recording, about the PowerPoint. Yes, we would like to assure our participants here, we have secured permission from Dr. Elizabeth that we are posting the PowerPoint and the recording, so do not worry about that. Now I give the time to Dr. Pavel and Dr. David to facilitate. We have, I guess we can extend up to 8 minutes, Dr. Pavel.
Okay. Thank you so much. We have a few questions from our attendees, and I'd like to start reading those questions. One of this is coming from Dr. Alotsa Gabashiane. I appreciate the heavy woman gender presence in Parliament, 65%. However, how do we reconcile with the fact that women in active politics seem to get into trouble more? That's a question.
Well, it's interesting because it's not just the women in active politics that, quote, get themselves into trouble. It's any woman activist who's on the public stage. She tends to get herself in trouble. Why? Because there is sometimes a conflict with the notion of freedom of speech, freedom of the press, all of this. So in the case of Rwanda, when I was there a couple of years back, Paul Kagame was running for his third term in office. And one might suggest that, yes, on the one hand, having stable leadership creates a stable country. But on the other hand, one might argue that perhaps new voices ought to be a part of the equation. But similar to some Asian philosophies, which we see, for example, in China, where President Xi keeps on being the president, this has happened in Rwanda as well, where there is this one leader, and he actually, Paul Kagame, it's believed that he made sure that the one woman who was running against him was arrested, imprisoned, and basically discredited to the point where she could no longer run for office. So the bottom line is it's not often just the women in parliament who end up on the hot seat. It's any woman who attempts to have a voice that doesn't go along with the party line, bluntly speaking.
Thank you so much. I just remembered Belarus, exactly the same situation.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that is politics, but it's also interesting. Another question is from Agnes Raimunda. Dr. Reilly, please share us your thoughts as regards to some qualitative experts believe that since it is the basic principle to do qualitative data analysis inductively, hence a theoretical framework is not recommended. Thank you.
It's interesting that you say that. I go round and round with this. Sometimes in conducting my investigations, I do not frame them with any kind of theoretical framework to start, and I watch what emerges over time. And other times I look at, for example, because I'm working with women globally, I look at post-colonial feminist theories, for example. Why would that be? Well, most feminist theories, for example, are based on the experience of white women. And so when we're working in Africa or we're working in South Asia or other parts of Asia, we want to look for a more nuanced understanding. So sometimes, I guess what I would say is with theoretical frameworks, I consider it part of the dialogue that goes on with the data, so that you may even end up constructing new theories and ways of understanding after you've got your data sets played out. It's not a simple answer, but I work both ways. So thank you for asking that, Agnes.
Yes, thank you so much. There is one more question from Luisito Nankil. How many tools and or methods should we use in narrative inquiry? Is storytelling similar to narrative inquiry? So it's about tools. Yes.
I think one thing that's important when considering any methodology is to read as much as you can, and then work on distilling some key principles to experiment with. So you notice that today I presented 3 major ideas. One is, how do we prepare to learn the story? Then what happens when we engage with the story? And then how do we construct the narrative? following that engagement. So those are three major tools, three ways and perspectives that I approach it. Storytelling, one might suggest that it's similar because in many ways we are telling a story, but notice that I'm not just telling someone's story. I'm thinking about how to approach the story ahead of time. And then I'm thinking about what is the best way to create that narrative and to create that conversation and establish that relationship at the end game of all this, that we have had a relationship by the conversation we've had. So it's not just telling someone's story without recognizing that their voice is preeminent. It's in front of me. And that is what I seek to do, and why I think it's a little bit different from storytelling, which feels like the author is more the center of it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Reilly. I think this will be the last question from Teofilo Damoko. Hello, Dr. Reilly. For the dependability, it was said that this can be established by considering the confidence level. In what way we can establish the confidence level in a qualitative research? Thank you.
With confidence level, we want to, there are a number of different ways to do that. I think that I mentioned at one point in my remarks the idea of seeking a saturation level with the perspective. So you've got your research question, you may have different aspects of that research question that you're investigating. In this case today, I've not talked about too much other than some progress. I haven't talked a lot about successes or a lot about the problems they face. But if I start interviewing people somewhere, anywhere from 6, 8, 10 interviews in, you'll start to see themes recur. And then what happens is you recognize that you're reaching that saturation point where you can be fairly certain that you now have a somewhat comprehensive view from that group of participants on that perspective. But again, one of the issues with qualitative research is trying to extrapolate that this can be applied to other circumstances. So we always need to be mindful of that and not get into this trap where, oh, because that's happening in Rwanda, this is going to be the same in the Philippines or in Indonesia or other places. Be very careful about that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Elizabeth. I think our time is up, and we have still many other questions here in the